Have you ever been in a relationship where the ghost of someone else's past seemed to linger around every corner? That's where I find myself now, in the middle of what should be a blissful new chapter, yet constantly haunted by the echoes of my girlfriend's ex. Every time his name slips into our conversations, I can't help but wonder if I'm living in his shadow. Is this just an innocent habit or a red flag I can't afford to ignore? Dive into my story as I try to unravel this emotional maze. I'm a 28-year-old guy living in the bustling city of Seattle, working as a software developer for a mid-sized tech company. My life, though hectic with coding marathons and tight deadlines, took a delightful turn about 8 months ago when I met Emma at a mutual friend's party. She's 26, a talented graphic designer with an infectious laugh and an adventurous spirit that drew me in from the start. Everything about her seemed perfect, and for the first few months, we were in that honeymoon phase, discovering each other's quirks and building a strong connection. But then, like an unexpected plot twist, her past began to creep into our present. It started innocuously enough, a casual mention of Mike during a story about her college days. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, we all have histories, right? But as weeks turned into months, I noticed Mike's name cropping up more frequently. He'd be mentioned in contexts ranging from music preferences to favorite travel spots. The frequency and casualness of these mentions began to gnaw at me. Initially, I tried to rationalize my feelings. I told myself it was natural to talk about past experiences, and that perhaps I was overthinking it. Yet each mention felt like a small sting, a reminder that I wasn't the first significant person in her life. I began questioning whether these were just fond memories or signs of unresolved feelings. My thoughts fluctuated between understanding and insecurity, leaving me caught in a cycle of doubt and curiosity about how to approach this growing concern. As the months rolled on, the mentions of Mike didn't just become more frequent, they started to infiltrate our life in more tangible ways. One Saturday afternoon, Emma and I were lounging on the couch, scrolling through Netflix options for our usual movie night. We landed on a travel documentary series. As we watched, Emma casually mentioned, "Oh, Mike and I always talked about visiting this place." Her words hung in the air like an uninvited guest. My stomach tightened, but I forced a smile, trying to brush it off as just another anecdote. But then came the first real curveball. Emma and I had planned a weekend getaway to the coast, a chance to escape the city and spend quality time together. As we packed the car, Emma pulled out a well-worn map, tracing her finger along a route. "Mike and I took this road trip once," she said absent-mindedly. I felt a flash of irritation. Here we were, planning our own adventure, yet it felt like I was sharing it with someone else. The trip itself was meant to be relaxing, but the tension was palpable. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mike was an invisible passenger. Each scenic view seemed to come with a story or memory from Emma's past, and I found myself comparing our relationship to this specter of a man I had never met. It was exhausting. On the last evening of our getaway, as we sat by a bonfire on the beach, I finally voiced my unease. "Emma," I started, choosing my words carefully. "I feel like Mike is a part of every conversation we have. It's hard for me sometimes." Emma looked genuinely surprised, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "I didn't realize I talked about him that much," she admitted. "He's just part of my past, and I guess I never thought it was an issue." Her response was both a relief and a new source of frustration. I appreciated her honesty, but it also meant she was unaware of how deeply it affected me. The rest of the evening was spent in a tense dance of trying to enjoy each other's company while avoiding the elephant in the room. Returning to Seattle, the issue didn't dissipate. It simmered beneath the surface. I began to feel a growing sense of insecurity and stress. Every time Mike's name came up, it was a reminder of my inadequacy, a fear that maybe I wasn't enough for Emma or that she still held a torch for him. This emotional turbulence made our relationship feel like walking a tightrope, and I was constantly on edge, afraid of what might come next. Determined not to let this issue fester, I decided that open communication was the best path forward. After our getaway, I suggested to Emma that we set aside time each week to discuss anything that might be bothering us. I hoped this would create a space where I could express my feelings about Mike's recurring presence without turning it into an argument. Emma agreed, appreciating the opportunity to be more transparent with each other. During these talks, I tried to articulate how the frequent mentions made me feel overshadowed. Emma was receptive, yet seemed genuinely puzzled by my distress. She reassured me that Mike was firmly in her past and that our relationship was her priority. While her words were comforting, I still struggled with the emotional residue each mention left behind. It was as if logic couldn't completely dispel the insecurity gnawing at me. In an effort to gain perspective, I reached out to my best friend Alex, who has a knack for seeing things clearly. He suggested that perhaps Emma was unaware of how much she referenced her past, and encouraged me to focus on building new, meaningful experiences with her. This advice gave me a new lens through which to view the situation, and I decided to plan more unique outings and activities that could become our memories. However, just as I felt we were making progress, the second curveball hit. One evening, while we were out to dinner, Emma received a text. Her face lit up as she read it, and she casually mentioned it was from Mike, who had reached out to catch up. My heart sank. It wasn't just the mention of his name this time. It was the reality of him actively re-entering her life, even if just virtually. This development felt like a setback. I was caught between wanting to trust Emma's intentions and the fear that his reappearance might reopen old feelings. I expressed my discomfort to Emma, who reassured me it was purely platonic, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Navigating this new dynamic proved challenging. Emma seemed earnest in her attempts to reassure me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being in competition with a ghost. Despite our efforts to communicate and connect, the unexpected intrusion of Mike into our lives had complicated an already delicate situation, leaving me more determined yet also more wary of how to proceed. The situation with Emma and the ever-present specter of Mike began to take a toll on me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Emotionally, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of insecurity and doubt. Every mention of Mike felt like a tiny cut, adding to a growing sense of inadequacy. I started questioning my worth, and whether I was truly the partner Emma wanted, or if I was merely a placeholder for someone she hadn't fully let go of. Mentally, the issue was exhausting. My thoughts were often consumed with analyzing every interaction for hidden meanings or signs of lingering attachment. This constant mental chatter made it hard to focus at work, where I was already dealing with demanding projects and tight deadlines. My productivity slipped, and I found myself staying late to compensate, which only added to my stress. Socially, the issue created a distance between me and those around me. I became more withdrawn, hesitant to discuss the problem with friends for fear of seeming insecure or paranoid. I didn't want to burden anyone with what might seem like a trivial issue, but inside it felt anything but trivial. Even my interactions with Emma became strained. Our easy laughter and spontaneous adventures replaced by careful conversations and a palpable tension. My day-to-day life felt overshadowed by this unresolved problem. I found myself avoiding situations where Mike might come up in conversation, leading to fewer shared experiences with Emma. This avoidance only served to deepen the chasm between us, creating a cycle of distance and misunderstanding. Internally, I struggled with a growing sense of hopelessness. Despite our attempts to communicate and connect, the ghost of Mike seemed to loom larger than ever. I felt trapped in a loop of doubt and anxiety, unsure of how to move forward without sacrificing the relationship I cherished. The weight of the unresolved issue was heavy, leaving me questioning whether I was fighting a losing battle against a past that wasn't even mine. As the emotional strain continued to build, I found myself grappling with thoughts I never wanted to entertain. It seemed that despite our best efforts, the shadow of Mike lingered over our relationship, and I began to wonder if something more drastic needed to be done. The idea of a breakup, once unthinkable, started to creep into my thoughts. Could it be that stepping back was the only way to regain my peace of mind and truly assess the situation? The prospect of ending things with Emma was terrifying. The very thought of losing the connection and joy we had built together felt like tearing a piece of myself away. Yet I couldn't ignore the toll this unresolved issue was taking on my mental health and happiness. I feared what the long-term consequences might be if I continued to let this ghost haunt our relationship without taking definitive action. Social stigma also weighed heavily on my mind. What would friends and family think if they knew I was considering such a drastic step over something as seemingly simple as mentions of an ex? Would they see me as insecure or unable to handle a mature relationship? These fears swirled around me, creating a storm of self-doubt and apprehension. The uncertainty was paralyzing. I was caught in a tug-of-war between the desire to preserve what Emma and I had and the need to protect my emotional well-being. It felt like a no-win situation, with each path leading to potential heartache and regret. In this moment of reflection, I realized that while the fear of change loomed large, The fear of staying stagnant in a situation that eroded my happiness was equally daunting. I was left at a crossroads, unsure of which direction to take, knowing that whatever choice I made could alter the course of my future profoundly. As I stand at this crossroads, my journey over the past months plays out in my mind like a complex narrative full of emotional highs and lows. What started as a blissful relationship has transformed into a tangled web of doubt and insecurity. Despite my best efforts to communicate and connect with Emma, the ghost of her past continues to cast a shadow over our present. Emotionally, I am exhausted yet still clinging to the hope that our relationship can weather this storm. The thought of losing Emma is deeply unsettling, yet so is the prospect of continuing in this state of constant unease. I find myself seeking clarity, wondering if I'm overreacting or if my concerns are valid. This is where I turn to you, the community, for guidance. Have any of you been in a similar situation where a partner's past threatened your present? How did you navigate it? Were there signs that helped you decide whether to hold on or let go? I hope that by sharing my story, someone might offer a perspective I haven't considered, a solution that could help me move forward with confidence. Alternatively, perhaps I just needed to lay my thoughts bare, to vent and find some semblance of peace in knowing that others might understand this emotional struggle. Whatever insights you can provide, I would greatly appreciate them. It's a daunting place to be, and any light you can shed on this path would be invaluable.